Good morning, and thank you all for joining us for another edition of Entrepreneurship and Career and Technical Education. Today, we are featuring two entrepreneurs in the construction industry. We've got Jesse Ladson with Ladson Construction, and we've got Robin Leinenweber from Eastern Shores Construction. And again, Dr. Nancy Rossiter to lead us through and facilitate the interview. Please feel free to add any questions in the chat, and then we'll also have opportunity for questions at the end. Thank you.
Well, good morning. This is the first time we've had two panelists. Usually we have one. So I'm just going to shout out my questions, and you guys can jump in. Or if you want to do it systematically, one of you answers first, the next one answers. It's up to you to figure that out. But anyway, again, thanks for joining us. So I'm going to jump right in with my questions. And the first question I have for you guys is, why did you decide to forego the steady paycheck route and start your own businesses?
Well, for me, I worked in the corporate world earlier in my career. Right out of college, I was very blessed to get some opportunities to work for some of the largest CMs of the world. And you're right, it was very, very comfortable in that type of environment, and I had a bright future there. So mine kind of came non-traditional, and it was really, my wife was 6 months pregnant at the time, and I made a jump to start my first business, and since then I had 3 or 4 different businesses now, but Ladson Construction is my baby, and really the whole reasoning behind that was because I always felt like I could do a bit more than what the corporate environment had me in. And it wasn't that I wanted to control my own destiny. It wasn't that I wanted the American dream. I knew I was bringing more value than what I was being paid for. And ultimately, I didn't know what that value was until I went out on my own. And I won't get ahead of ourselves and we can talk about the story, but it's something that I wish I would have done sooner.
I would say for me, I was raised in a home where my father was a carpenter and then a contractor, so I only knew him to work for himself. And so, I went through college. I had eventually got a master's degree, worked summers, weekends with him, and then didn't think that I would end up in the industry, and I had been exposed to it quite a bit. So after my graduate school, I went to work with him, and he was kind of phasing out. And so when I was working with him as a carpenter framer, then I ended up starting to subcontract my own work, and I started to realize, like, hey, I'm out on my own, but I have the opportunity to control, my own destiny, my money, create more opportunities. And I think it was just the opportunity to be in control of your income, and to know that if you want more, you can work for it, as opposed to a corporate structure where you're married to a salary and then a bonus structure. And so I really, really enjoyed that. And there's a competitive aspect to that as well. And so I started subcontracting on my own, and then I ended up getting my contractor's license, and it kind of grew from there. My father eventually retired, and I have really not known it any differently, but I just feel that with my nature, my temperament, my personality, yes, there's not a safety blanket, but I'm more comfortable being in control.
Okay, great. Well, I can definitely relate to your stories, because I spent my first 3 years in corporate America, and I was not happy there as well. So I understand where you guys are coming from. My next question has to do with how you decided to get into the construction business. I know that we had, some influence in the family, but what in particular drove you to the particular type of construction that you're doing now? I think you're muted.
There you are. So before going into college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I was a hands-on guy, and really at that time, I had some life-changing events that kind of, I would say, changed my mindset my senior year of high school. So I was going to be an electrician by trade, was what I was going to be back in high school. it wasn't until when my brother and my grandfather passed that it ultimately changed my mindset and really my trajectory moving forward. Never really knew commercial construction, didn't even know residential construction. So about my freshman, sophomore year in high school, excuse me, my cousin was working for a very large CM called PCL, another corporate company. He has since left to start his own company. And I seen how well he was doing. I seen the cool buildings he was building. I seen what he was exposed to and just the level of status that he was becoming in the industry. And I ultimately thought, wow, this is a mentor of mine, it's a role model. I want to be like him one day. And so ultimately that's the path that I went. And it was ultimately, it was finding that mentor, it was finding that person that I looked up to and someone that I felt like I could trust and watch from a distance. And if I replicated what he did, I knew I would be successful. And so we fast forward into college. I never looked at myself as the top of my class. I was always, a small town country boy. I I could never compare myself to a UNF or an Auburn grad. And I found myself graduating with a lot of opportunities in '09, which was, and I'm sure Robert remembers this time, '09 when no one was hiring. I
Yeah,
was
I
I
remember.
was I was working for free. I was interning for free just to get the experience. And so when I did that, I really started to see where I started to fit and the opportunities that started to present themselves. And when I seen the opportunities in commercial construction, I knew that's the route that I wanted to go. So right out of college, I went to Turner Construction. I was there for 4 or 5 years, went to Gilbane, and then that's when I started my company. So I've always known commercial construction.
I would say for me, why construction? I think looking back, I did well in school, but I had to work really hard. It wasn't something that came naturally. I would say, in hindsight, there was probably some focus issues there. Uh, but with construction, you're always doing and moving, and it changes constantly. Most days are not the same, and I think when like Jesse was saying, when you start in the trades and you're actually doing something with your hands, you're creating something tangible, be it wiring a home, drywall, framing, something like that. And so that experience coming up was so gratifying. Plus, I have learned over the years, I'm more of a, I guess what they would call a kinesthetic learner. I have to learn by doing and experiencing, and construction is perfect for that. And I think too, being outside, um, more is terrific. Now, I'm on the other side of it. I have a bigger business. I run a bigger business. I have employees, but I'm still out there every day. I'm not making and building things like I used to, but I definitely think creating something with your hands was the draw to start with.
Yeah, and Nancy, if I can add to that, and I'm sure Robert will agree to this, is that it's every single day is something new.
Something.
It's there's not one day I come to the office, there's not one day I knock every item off my list. There's not one day, but everything goes
Right, right.
according to plan. It's like construction. We have schedules. Name one job that is went according to a schedule that I put on paper 6 months prior.
Sure.
That's business.
And it's really problem solving. You're
Yeah.
just, there's issues that arise. I mean, they're not detrimental, but they're problems, solutions, and you work through it. And it's challenging, and you know, more on the other side of it now, leadership and management. That's the majority of what I do. I'm sure Jesse's probably the same thing, and scheduling is a big part of it. But those are the things that pulled me into it. I mean, it's definitely variety for sure.
Yeah, and I'm familiar with the process because I just built a house that was finished just about a year ago. So I know that things do not go as planned, and you
Right.
always end up with spending more money and it taking more time than you plan. So,
Sure.
but on the subject of money, how did you guys gather your resources in order to get your businesses started?
So I leveraged my own personal account. When I started, I may have had 20, $30,000 to my name, and I'd never I didn't have a family member or I didn't inherit anything. I didn't get a loan. And so, I always tell the story to my staff. And so I mentor construction business owners as well. And I tell them this story, I started in my home office. It was 11 by 11 and I had the cheapest furniture I could purchase from IKEA. And I would At this time, my daughter is now born. She's weeks old, and I remember waking up on Saturday mornings, shirt off, she's sitting on my lap, and I'm working. That's how I started. It doesn't, so a lot of people come up different ways. That's my story. That's how I came up. People ask, do you need money to get started? You don't need money to get started. You need the ability to want to work. You have to want to go for it. If there's any sense of being laziness or being complacent, that's setting you up for disaster on day one. It's just, the hard work does pay off, but you don't need capital. You don't need the best of the best to get started.
He is so right. It's the work ethic. It's hard work. I was the same way. I started out of my home, out of my truck. We took small jobs, decks,
So,
kitchens, bathrooms, things where you didn't have to have a tremendous amount of operating capital. And you can also find situations with clients where you can set up an agreement where you're paid every 2 weeks, based on what you've produced and what you've done. So you don't have to have a tremendous amount of operating capital. And then there's always credit,
yeah,
and as far as purchasing and buying materials. So there's a way around it, but it's really all in the work ethic. And you start small, and then you build and you save, and you build and you save, and then eventually you have more operating capital, allows you to take on bigger projects.
yeah.
Uh, you know, I guess it sounds simple, but there, you just got to do it. You got to work hard at it. He's exactly right. There's many weekends and nights and things like that building a business, but it's one of construction and in the trades. If you're a small business owner, it's one of those businesses to where it's pretty easy to start and build on it.
It is. It is. Yeah, it's never a right time to do it. And that was always the big thing that always held me back was I had that comfortable salary. I had the incredible benefits, and I had a bright future. And it never felt right to leave because I had that very comfortable blanket there.
Sure.
But it's never a right time to do it. You just got to do it.
Okay, great piece of advice there. Um, and then my next question has to do with education. How did your education help you or influence you to take the path that you ended up taking?
Mhm. So education is not needed for certain areas in business that I think you're going to. For me, I got my construction management degree from UNF. I did my master's at UCF. So for me, I was going the corporate world. So I wanted as much education as possible to really give me a leg up and just build my resume. Um, but running a business is not a degree. Running a business is not something you learn in the classroom. It's finding a mentor. It's finding a group of people who hold you accountable. So I talk about circles, having a circle, having a community, and then having somebody in your corner. Like you really have to evaluate who you're around when you're starting a business because those people can build you or they can bring you down.
That's really good. That's really well said. I mean, I think, you know, education, it's kind of funny. The best education is the practical experience you get out there doing it, and construction management degrees are great, engineering degrees are great, and it certainly gives you a leg up and a start. But what Jesse's saying is, being out there doing it and then finding people that are doing what you want to do or at the level you want to be at and using them as kind of a guide and a mentor. You can gain so much information. My educational background is in psychology. I have an undergraduate in psychology and I have a master's in clinical psychology. I never went that way. I never went into that career. And I think that helps me to some degree, but the accounting side, the practical business side of it, I wish I would have had a little bit more there, because that's trial, I guess trial and error and figuring all that out. But it's a matter of networking, and the best way to learn is just by getting out there and getting the experience that comes with it.
Just out of curiosity, do your psychology degrees help you at all when you're hiring people? Like when you're talking to them, like, this person maybe not the type that's going to show up on the job.
It sure helps me with the clients. uh, uh,
That's
I
a
will
good point.
say, yes. The master's degree was a lot of self discovery, and I think with that, it kind of helped me learn who I was as a person and how I interact with other people. And I think, when you're out there in front, you're running a business and you're the face of the business and you're dealing with subcontractors and clients, I think the more you can refine your approach and be a better communicator and a leader is certainly helpful. Yes, it does help to hire people, and it also helps with clients in particular. I do more residential. I do some commercial, but more residential. Working with a husband and wife can be an interesting opportunity because especially when you're building a dream home or a forever home, you have to have peace and harmony, and so there's a relationship there that you're joining, and the more you're aware of some of their interpersonal behaviors or tendencies, the easier it is to facilitate the job, keep everybody happy, and which it should be an enjoyable experience, but it does help to some degree.
Okay, great. Okay, so my next question, we all know that, running a business, you have, opportunities and challenges. What has been the thing that has given you the most joy from running your business? Like maybe an example or something that went really, really well that made you think, hey, I'm on the right track here.
So for me, it's a couple of things. The first thing that comes to mind is I focus a lot on younger staff. So we hire a lot from UNF and a lot of the local colleges, and watching them really, I would say, get better and better and better. When we train, we invest back into the people, and they can truly resolve things when I'm not in the office. That that sets me afire more than anything. Is knowing that they're personally responsible for their decisions, which is a core value of ours. It's personal responsibility, and knowing that they're making a personal decision for the best interest of the company when I'm out, and when I come back, they want that to be known. They and not that it's entitlement, and that's not what it is, because I do think there's a lot of that in today's society. But I think it's, they're proud of the decisions that they're making on the behalf of the company, but their decisions based on the values that they're trained on. So that I get a lot out of that. One of the I'd say the biggest thing for me when I knew I was onto something was when I had just started. So I finished my first year from August to December at $700,000 in revenue. We doubled to almost 3 million, doing it to 8 million. Well, now we're on track to be 30 million. It's when I really started to see, hey, we're really doing something right here. And when we truly started to hire based on our values and see that it was really us just being authentic and doing what was ethically and morally right, not necessarily always focus on the bottom line, but what truly is ethically right. If I'm in my client's shoes, how would I really want to be treated? And it's when we started to see things click and work was coming in, and not necessarily having to double our marketing budget, triple our marketing budget, but truly based on referrals, we knew we were onto something.
Those are good points. I would say for me, you know, we're I have a business, but we're building something. We create something. We make something. It's visible. It lasts. So there's a tremendous amount of pride, when you work within a community and you can go by with your kids and say, we built that, or we renovated that restaurant, or we built that house, and so your kids can see something that you help create. They can come to the job, they can see what you do, and it's a reminder. It's not, not a knock on any other industry, but it's not selling an insurance policy or, something like that. I mean, it's physical and it's tangible. And so there's a lot of pride that comes with that. And I think the other side too is maximizing potential. It's taking people, like Jesse was saying, hiring people, young people, inspiring them, getting them interested in the trade and the industry, and watching them grow. I think in this world, if we all approached whatever we did with the attitude that we're going to do the best that we can possibly do, and when you build a home or a building or a commercial building, you really need to do that, because that's what's going to help you make money. You don't want problems or issues. And it's like you're only as good as your last job. So when you can bring young people in and inspire them to be the best that they can be, and see them grow in confidence and mature, and they're representing them, not only themselves as individuals or humans, but they're representing your business as well. There's a lot of satisfaction that comes with that.
Okay, fantastic. But then on the flip side of the coin, we all know that small businesses run into challenges that are unexpected, that come up. What experience can you tell us about that may have challenged you, and how did you get around it?
The biggest challenges for us as a small business right now is obviously wanting and needing to acquire new talent. As a new company, you know, 3 years into it, almost 4 years now, and trying to compete with the Gilbane and the Turners and the packages they offer, going back to really that comfort blanket. It's that's been the biggest challenge for us. So we're having to get creative. We're having to stay innovative with what we do and offer. It's really attracting new talent. And so we have looked at recruiters. We don't use recruiters anymore. Everything is based on referrals and leads within the company. So we actually utilize our people to find new talent, and then I compensate my people for that. It's $6 per hire after 90 days of paid last. So I work into those incentives. Um, but it's besides that, I think we're always going to see a challenge in the trade workplace when people just don't want to work. It's going to happen in mine and Robert's industry. I don't think I don't think that's necessarily something him or I can change. I definitely think it starts with our trade partners and who we want to partner with and who they're hiring based on what they're hiring. Are they overcommitting on projects and under delivering? Because it's mine or Robert's decision to chase that next job if we can. Does it make sense for us? It doesn't make sense for us to set the company for failure, for disaster. But you are going to get in predicament situations where I have a hard time saying no to jobs. I do, and I chase and chase, and hey, I'll figure it out when I get there, and I always do. But the time's going to come when I'm not able to, and so that's what we've got to be mindful to, and that's a challenge for us.
I think Jesse's right. I think if I had to pick some of the bigger challenges or issues or problems at this day and time, it's personnel. It's hiring crews, hiring people, and it's a constant challenge. And I think we've had a shortage of we've had a workforce shortage in the construction industry prior to COVID. And one of the things that is concerning to me, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but to get younger people exposed to the trades and into the trades, and eventually create opportunities for them to where they can own their own business. This, like what Jesse was saying, he's trying to be creative and competitive to get to hire talent. Like when the Chick-fil-A's of the world are offering $16 an hour for young people to work there, and we want to pull them into an industry that's, I always call it hot. It's hot, hard, and difficult work for less. And I think it's finding creative ways to get people in the industry exposed to it, but we need to be paying them a little bit more, which is a slippery slope. So I think the labor side is particularly challenging. I think now too, I'm sure Jesse sees it. The the COVID the post-COVID world relative to supply and demand and being able to get materials in a timely manner, it creates a significant amount of work, more so on the front end. You would secure a project, and then you would start, and then based on your phases of completion, you would start ordering things. And now we find ourselves ordering things so much more on the front end months prior to needing them, so we can have them. And so that just creates a different challenge administratively as far as purchasing and getting everything together and being able to warehouse it. So that's another challenge. But it's just, if you're in an industry like we are, where, like Jesse said, every day is different. It's full of, and so if you're used to trying to adapt and overcome, it's all feasible and doable, but it doesn't negate the fact there's some fatigue that does come with it. But
Yeah, and it's hard for us to sit right here and really outline all the challenges we go through every day. I know a lot of things are heard on the outside looking in within a construction professional, but when I say it's fires every morning, it's where's my switchgear coming from? I got a project duration that's 6 months, but it's going to take me 60 weeks to get switchgear. How am I going to make this happen? But these are the type of things that we deal with. But this is what's great about our industry in Jacksonville in itself, is that I know I can pick up the phone and call a competitor and say, hey, what are you guys seeing?
that's a good point. I didn't, when I started on my own in my late 20s and my 30s, I didn't do as good of a job as building the network as I should have. And I think now, where I'm at professionally, your competitors are also resources and you're really in it together. When I interview for a project, I always say, there's a lot of good builders out there. And I like to know who I'm bidding against or I'm competing against. And, if we all do a great job and we're as professional as possible, then it'll give us an opportunity to make more money and the clients are happier. So it's building the network helps overcoming any obstacle. It helps overcome the obstacles. It really does.
That's huge. That's probably one of the biggest pieces of advice I'd ever give is that's probably your biggest, I would say that will be your biggest strength in business is build the network and build the relationships. That'll get you going a long ways.
Well, really fantastic piece of advice. I teach the entrepreneurship class here, and we do book reviews, so they have an opportunity to read some of the literature that's out there for running a business. And one of them I believe is "Dig Your Well Before It's Dry" by Harvey Mackay, and it basically talks about starting a business and building your network. His premise is, who are you going to call at 2 o'clock in the morning when you need a $10,000 loan? It's not going to be someone that you haven't spoken to in 2 or 3 years. It's going to be, the people that you are in touch with. And so we try to get them to start thinking about their networks even before they start writing their business plan. So that's one of the things. And I'm happy to hear you both say that. But so those are my questions, and now let's turn it over to the chat or to Julie, who wants to chime in with any additional questions.
Actually, hey Nancy, while they're doing that, you mentioned business plan, and I think business plans are very important. I did one before I even started. Before I even started a business, I started a business plan, and I can look back on that business plan now. The vision was the same, and where I'm going to get to is that everyone has an aspect of themselves that is a visionary. So you have a visionary, you got integrators, you got a implementator, and I believe there's one more. But everyone has the ability to really vision where their life is going to be. And I'm a visionary guy. So when I look back on that, I see how the business has just grown over the years. But what you'll see is that your initial business plan, you're thinking so small. And as you continue to move forward in your career and as you continue to build value into yourself, you start thinking bigger. And so it's real interesting. I can look back on that business plan and my model was I was going to do a few $1 million a year, 1 or 2 employees. I was going to work out of my home, not have a mortgage, not have any of this. Well, then now I fast forward, and we're tracking at 30 million. I got my own building. I got a staff of 14, but it's interesting how the mind starts to build itself, which started from just a very small business plan.
Good point.
Did you ever update the business plan, or was it just the business plan that you wrote in the beginning?
I did not. I just focused on the business and kept moving forward. But Nancy, what I did do, back to mentors, I hired a business coach 2 years ago, was completely changed my life. And it's changed my net worth as a person. And that's been a big reason on why we've been able to do what we've done in a short amount of time.
That's fantastic. I've never heard that before. So that's great. Okay. So I don't see any questions in the chat. Julie, did you have some questions that you wanted to ask?
Yes, I had a couple of questions just from the point of view of probably some of the students who will be seeing this video. Duval and Nassau County both have career academies, and there are some where students might be working on carpentry or electricity. I think one even has an HVAC program. So they're starting to maybe discover that they like this hands-on type work. And just wonder, when you're looking at your businesses, we talked a little bit about hiring. So what would you say to those students who are, they're maybe not in that process where they're looking at the AA and then the building construction degree at UNF, but maybe they're just really starting to get their hands on the skills, and they know that they love this making something, creating something. Just wonder what your advice would be to them when you're looking at maybe honing the skill or the craft versus also getting the education piece.
I think if I'm thinking of an individual who's a junior in high school or senior in high school and he's learning the basics of being a tradesman in the mechanical field, for example, the need of that is going to get more and more. You're in my eyes, and Robert, I could be totally wrong here. You're more than welcome to call me out on this. Is that I foresee very, very high level people in the field and tradesmen, quite frankly, might be and they do right now get outpaid than people in the office. I think there's a misconception of people that work in the field and work in the office. People think that tradesmen out in the field don't make good money. They think people out in the field are lower on the ladder pole, and it's not true. There are some really, really strong professionals in the field. I think about general superintendents. I think about foremen. I know foremen that are making well over $100,000 a year. I know foremen that are quite frankly a point of contact for some companies because they've been able to build a trust factor. So I wish there was a way to change that conception about tradesmen versus an educated individual who has a bachelor's degree. That needs to change because times are changing. And we can use truck drivers, for example. Truck drivers are going to be a thing of the past if we're going to get more people in the seats. The same thing with welders. We got to get more people in those in those shoes. And if I'm a junior in high school and I know I can have a very strong professional career, doing really well, being hands-on in the field, watching that clock go as fast as possible. Because I tell you, there's things in the office when every minute of the day feels like an hour. But if I'm hands-on out in the field and I can truly see something come together, I I think it's very, very tempting.
I think Jesse's right. There are people in the industry that make a really good living, and they do very well for themselves. And there is a misconception that people in the construction industry are bouncing around for $12 an hour and going paycheck to paycheck and hand to mouth, and that's not always necessarily true. I think, speaking about kids in high school, we definitely need trade schools back in high school, and they're coming back more. They're coming back more to some degree, but for some reason we got away from them. I think if you look, and Jesse might know differently, but in the last 10 years, I would say I can think of 3 individuals that came looking for work that were, fresh out of high school and 19 or 20 years old. Like that wanted to be in the industry. Like usually it ends up kind of in a roundabout way by default. It's not the first choice for kids out of high school, or not for many. So I think getting kids exposed to it in high school, finding out what they're interested in, and then I think if I was, giving advice to a kid that was in high school, I think, be open to learning and be willing to work. Sometimes so many kids do not come out of high school with an amazing work ethic, and so they get on with a crew or a mechanical crew or a framing crew, and there's not a lot of, they're not doing it. They're a little bit lazy, they're on their phones. And so then they get chastised and it's a negative experience. I think kids coming out of high school in the trade schools, find out what you like and develop a work ethic, and I think, not to go down that road, but we need younger people that display a little bit better work ethic, in the trades. And it's coming around now, but not where it needs to be because it's hard work. But if you think about it, if you get out of high school and you start with an electrician and they send you to school, some electricians will pay for your journeyman school if you make straight A's. Within 3 years, you can get a journeyman license. So you could start at, anywhere, depending on the company, $16 to $18 an hour out of high school, okay, to work as a helper. If you're in trade school, they will bump you a couple bucks a year. So by the time you get out of trade school, you could be making $22 to $24 an hour. Once you get your journeyman license, you're $26 to $28 an hour. But if you look at that, what is the 10,000 hours of mastery? If you work 50 weeks a year at 40 hours a week, that's 2,000 hours a year. Within, 7 years, you will have enough experience to have mastery of the electrical trade and also be able to test for your master's license. And then you could potentially have your own business, and you could be making a tremendous amount of money. But I think back to the original question, it's being exposed to the trades and things that you like. Some kids like carpentry, some kids like electrical, and it's getting on and putting yourself in opportunities and experiences with different companies that, would give you a chance to see it hands on and working hard.
Yep.
Okay, we have a question from the chat, and it says, "What is your favorite thing to?" Oops, it just moved. What is your favorite thing that you like to do in your field that's hands-on?
Robert, you want to go first?
I would say, I started as a framer. So I framed houses, and then, which was more rough carpentry. And then I got into the finished trades a little bit. But now I think it's framing a house. I think it's building walls and framing a house. I mean, you can have a slab of a house poured. You can show up with 6 guys, and by the end of 2 days, you got the first floor framed. And then 2 days later, you got the floor system in. So when you build a house and you get it to where it's dried in, and you have a roof over it, and it's like you can look at something that you made with your hands that's 28 feet tall and 3,000 square feet. It's a pretty neat experience. I think that's my favorite thing.
Yeah, so I will piggy on that as well. And what comes after framing is drywall. I love seeing drywall go up. It's like how Robert sees the walls going up. I think when drywall goes up, I can really start to vision the space. That's one of my favorite parts of the process. On interior jobs, if it's new construction, I love it when the walls are up and steel joists are set. So I love big, heavy steel products. So that's one of my favorite areas is watching the steel erectors up on the joists and up on the lifts with the welders and the cranes.
Steel is cool.
That's one of my
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite parts to see. Because I always look at these steel erectors as just big, burly, tough guys that if I go up and shake his hand, he's going to break my hand in half. That's how I look at these guys, and a high level of respect.
As a person who's just recently built a house, that was my favorite part too. After looking at the slab with the pipe sticking out of it for like 3 or 4 weeks, to have the framing go up and then eventually the drywall go in, that's a lot of fun too.
It's an interesting experience as a homeowner because you wait and you wait, and then you get the slab, and then they start framing it. It starts going so fast. You're like, we're going to be done soon, and then it slows down again. And then it speeds up, and then you have all this open framing, and you're like, oh, this looks so big. And like Jesse said, then you drywall, and you're like, oh my God, it got small again. Yeah, how did that happen?
Yes, I've had that experience. Okay, we have another question in the chat. It says, if a student has a NCCER Carpentry Level 1, would you hire them? And what is your typical starting salary for, and then the other part of that question is, what about NCCER Electrical Level 1?
So I think it depends on the type of company that is hiring. So as us, if that individual is looking to truly be hands-on, self-performing work, a company like mine, I'm gonna hire more based on work ethic than I am based on a degree or a certification or whatnot. But we don't self-perform work, so I'm not the right one to answer that. But if it was a student that said, "Look, I have great work ethic, I know construction," I would interview that individual, excuse me, for an entry level position, but that would solely be based on work ethic. That's what we hire based on.
what do those levels mean? I'm not familiar with those terms. So to answer the question, I probably would need to know what those, obviously that comes from the trade school or the school. So what is a level one?
I'm not sure myself. I just, if I have an electrical problem, I hire an electrician. I don't, ask about their other qualifications. So,
Well, I can answer this because I asked around before we started the chat the last couple of days. So my electrician starts helpers at $16 to $17 an hour. If they came with a little bit of experience or some sort of trade school, they might get more. Yeah, framing tends to be on the lower. He just chimed in what that certification was. It just popped up.
I don't have it on my end, so it was
Yeah,
probably sent directly to you.
yeah, so really it's understanding the basics of construction and hands-on work.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
carpentry or electrical anywhere between $16 to $18 an hour, depending on the background and skill. But Jesse's right. You hire based on the person. I have 9 full-time carpenters, so we do perform some things. I do hire some sub crews as needed, but I would rather have someone that is, a good person, that's highly motivated, that can be trained and taught. It doesn't have to be someone with a degree, of course, or someone with that type of trade school, but it certainly helps. It certainly helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned trade schools that we need them back because we just need to get more kids exposed to them. And the levels and the certifications I'm not certainly familiar with, but they've got to help. And there's such a demand right now in electrical, plumbing, mechanical, framing that I would say 16 to 18 would be a fair starting wage.
Okay, there's another question in the chat, and it says, for students that have one of these NCCER certifications, what do you recommend the next steps that they do after high school?
I would develop your people skills as much as possible. Learn truly how to have a conversation with a person. Learn how to
Without
deal
the
with
telephone.
pressure.
Without
The telephone. Don't text. Just if you want to call for a meeting, that's great. But I mean, truly, like, meet a person. Um, I was never exposed to that at a young age, and yes, it did hold me up a little bit. But ultimately, people just need to put down the phone, quit texting, and just gain people skills. Really start to develop yourself, learn how to talk to people, and learn how to deal with tough situations. That's the first thing I would do.
That's a good point. I think, if you, depending on what you get your certification in coming out of high school, if you want to do electrical, uh, look around at some companies and see, what kind of projects they do and where they work. Do they work in your community? Do they work in your neighborhood? Is it mostly residential? Is that what interests you? Is it commercial? If you're a carpenter and you want to get into framing, do they frame and build big oceanfront houses, or do they do more commercial construction? And it's like, I think, look at the different businesses, look at the different companies and see what kind of work they do and if that interests you, and the communication side of it is key. Very, very important.
But and when you do that, learn the company, like really understand what they do, understand what the name of the owner is, understand the names of the people that make the decisions.
The history of the
Never
business.
100% go in there with confidence, go in there with knowledge that you truly do value my time or Robert's time or the CEO's time. If you come into my office and you haven't looked at the website, you don't know who I am, you don't know who my operations manager is, I almost feel like that individual doesn't value my time enough.
Exactly. I hear that a lot from employers as well. That looks like it's all the questions in the chat. Julie, did you have another question?
Let me just check the chat. Okay, I think that's it. And I just thank you both for your time. There was just so much good information here for specific to your field, but also I think just for entrepreneurs in general. Jesse, my favorite thing that you said was you don't need money to get started. You need to want to work. And I think that's something that all of our students who are thinking about starting their own business need to hear. Unless you're putting down got to be in a brick and mortar building to get started. You're exactly right. There's a way to start. And then Bob, the reminder that you gave us, that you said it, looking back, that you would have done more to build your network in the beginning. I think those are two of the key things that I'm taking away from this. And also the reminder that as an entrepreneur, do your best every single time, because you're only as good as your last job. I think those are three key takeaways for me. And we look forward to being able to share this with students and having the curriculum guides so that they can pull out wisdom as well from this. And I know that we have a couple of educators that have logged on, so you guys may be hearing from them. I know that especially starting these new career academies, they often like to be able to have classroom speakers, but also speaking to the parents. That's where we, even here at the college in our construction and trades programs, getting people to see the big picture of where these programs can lead to is always a challenge. And so you two may be able to help again, and maybe on some of our parent nights or something, tell your story and show them the different side.
Sure. Yeah, Julie, there's one thing I want to say, and it's be the last one I say is, the biggest reason people don't go into business, and the biggest reason they don't take that big step is fear. It's the fear of failure. That's the number one reason why people don't start business. And I can promise you, failure is going to happen, and it's going to happen a lot. So that's if you can identify that and really come to your senses that failure is going to happen, just embrace it, accept it, and move on. Some failures cost a bit more than others, but just take it on the chin and keep going, because that is the number one thing in life that'll hold you back, is the fear of failure.
Good point. Yep. The adversity and the challenges that come with owning your own business, those are what make you better. That's what makes you stronger. And it can be uncomfortable at times, but it's all part of it.
Thank you. I agree. Well, thank you very much. We're going to do a little editing to this video, and then we'll get it out to everyone to use. You feel free to use it to promote your own business as well. And Dr. Rossiter, thank you again for facilitating this interview.
Yep, and thank you all. It's been very informative. We appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.
Anytime,
Yes,
any other way I can help would be great. Thank you very much. And Jesse, good luck to you, bud.
Yes, sir. You as well. Good talking.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.